Hi, this is Joanna from Custom Quilts, and today I'm going to talk to you about fussy cutting prints for the center of your Moroccan tiles quilt. So you can see on the cover quilts, I had fussy cut stripes so that they all met in the center to make a really cool design. And so today I'm going to be cutting up a print. This is a Tula Pink print from the All Stars line. And what you're going to need is either your printed templates from your pattern, or if you've purchased the acrylic templates, you'll need your set of these. If you're using the acrylic templates, you're going to want to use some sort of non-slip, or you're going to need to hold it really steady whenever you're cutting. So I like these True Grips adhesive non-slip rings are really good. Or if you've got some glitter washi tape lying around, or if you have a Hobby Lobby or Joann's, some kind of craft store close to you, you can pick up some glitter washi tape. This is what I use most of the time. And so you can see on this template, I just put a few strips on the back side of it, of each acrylic template. And what that does is it creates a little more drag so it doesn't slip as easily on the fabric. I think I picked this up on Etsy because it was a little thinner than typical washi tape, like Scotch brand. So you can just use whatever you prefer. I like the thinner one because it doesn't obstruct the view as much once you've got it on there. And I think the Scotch brand is like something like 3 times as wide as this one. So just something to think about before you get started. If you have the printed templates and you're fussy cutting, you're going to need to do a little bit extra work. So these I printed on cardstock and I cut them out already. And for the sake of fussy cutting, it's best if you cut out the inside the 1/4 inch seam allowance. And so what this does is it gives you kind of like a little viewfinder window. So you can easily determine what you want to be seen in your quilt. So what will actually be the center portion. And so everything that you see inside this line that's cut out, that's going to be visible on your quilt. The white part is your 1/4 inch seam allowance. And the same goes for your acrylic templates. Everything inside this etched line is going to be showing up in your quilt. So you'll just need to use this kind of as a viewfinder to determine how you want this pattern to show up in your quilt. So you might want to have it show up like this, or like this, or you might want to use this cool bird and have its beak pointing towards the center. And so I'm going to show you how to cut these out and line them up so that they make a really cool effect inside the Moroccan tile. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. The only difference between these two is the acrylic templates are a little more heavy duty. And once you cut out the center of this paper template, you're going to need to be really careful that you don't distort it or push it whenever you're cutting. So just be really careful about this, and you may even want to trace this onto something a little heavier duty than cardstock. Maybe like a piece of cardboard from a shipping box that you have handy. Just say you're not going to risk cutting your fingers because there isn't much to hold on to here. Or you can opt to not cut the center out and use the entire template, but you won't have this viewfinder. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I've decided that I want to use these big, beautiful blooms. And the reason that I decided I'm going to use these is this is a fat 1/4 fabric. I'm just going to make a pillow out of this sample. And I may decide to go back and make a quilt later, but for right now, I'm just going to do one block. And so since this is a fat 1/4, I need to make sure that I've got enough for my 4 pieces cut from template 2 to make up one center of a Moroccan tile, which is this little circle part. And so I'm looking at my fabric, and if you can see the bottom part, so I've got one bloom here, and I know I have enough for a seam allowance also. I've got one here, and I've got one up here. I had thought about using the smaller blooms here, here, and here, but I don't have enough seam allowance for this one, and I've only got 3 left over. So this big flower is going to be my best bet. So that's definitely something to consider when you're fussy cutting these, is the extra fabric that it takes. With stripes, it's not that big of a deal because the stripe is printed throughout, and so you don't have to worry about it. But for a print that's this spread out, you're going to need quite quite a lot of yardage to complete this as a quilt. Okay, so the next thing to consider is what type of rotary cutter you're going to be using. So typically, most of the time as quilters, probably we're all using 45mm rotary cutters. They're the most commonly found and readily available. There are other specialty rotary cutters like a 28mm, so it's a little bit smaller in diameter. You can see when I put these side by side. And the reason that I'm going to be using this 28mm is it hugs the curves a little bit better on these templates. You'll find that if you're using a 45mm, you can still do it. It's not impossible and not really even that difficult, but you've got to go a little bit slower to cut this curve. And definitely whenever you're cutting out your template 1, the inner curve can be a challenge. So you just have to really slow down. Or if you don't have a 28mm rotary cutter, you might even want to trace the inner curve and then cut it by hand with scissors. So just some tips that I found helpful whenever I was making my Moroccan tiles quilts. But let's go ahead and get to the fussy cutting. So I have determined exactly where I want my bloom to be cut. And I'm going to hold my template 2 in place, and I'm going to go ahead and make my cuts. Just be really careful that your fingers are out of the way. Okay. So this is what our print's going to look like, and that's really pretty. The next thing that we're going to do is, how do we make sure that we cut exactly the same thing? It's going to be difficult to do that, right? Well, not really. So what I like to do whenever I'm fussy cutting prints is I like to lay my other piece exactly on top of where I cut, especially when it's something this intricate. With stripes, it's easier to line up because you have reference points that you can easily line up and it's not that big of a deal. But with more complicated prints like this, it can be a challenge. Okay, so I'm just matching this. And that looks pretty well perfect. So now that I have that lined up exactly where I want it, I'm going to put my template directly on top of the piece that I already cut. And I'm going to make sure that everything's lined up really nicely, and I'm going to go and cut that out again. Just like that. Perfect. And we've got 2 that are exactly alike. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing 2 more times. Fussy cut my prints. Hopefully you can see how I'm doing this. So I'm just putting this on top and lining it up until the prints match. Also, if you're nervous about putting this on top, you can take a pin and trace around this. Something like a friction pin or a water erasable marker. And then use your template to cut it. Come on, little guy, get in place. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and line my template up again. Yes. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and cut. Great. All right, another winner. Okay, now we've got one more. So I'm going to line this up. Whoops. Okay, that looks pretty close, so I'm going to go ahead and put my template on that. All right. This is going to be our 4th and final piece for the center of the circle. All right, and we're done. So what we've ended up with is Swiss cheese fabric, right? And we've got this really cool flower in the center of our Moroccan tile. And so one thing to consider when picking a fabric for this is, I knew that this wasn't a symmetrical print, but if you choose something that's symmetrical, you'll get like this really cool symmetrical effect like you did with the stripes, or like you might have seen with the stripes. So since it was the same on both sides, back and forth, you have the same effect kind of like mirrored throughout. And this one, you see that in the center with this little, I guess that's a leaf that we fussy cut. And it just looks really cool. And so I'm going to use a green print around this to really make this pop. But hopefully that'll help you with any questions you had about fussy cutting prints. And I also have a video showing how to fussy cut stripes on the Moroccan Tiles playlist on my YouTube channel. So hopefully that helped you guys, and I can't wait to see what prints you pick to fussy cut on your Moroccan tiles. Thanks so much for watching.